The thin crimson light of dawn had only just begun to spill across the amber-tiled rooftops of Sunspear when Oberyn Nimmerose Martell stepped barefoot onto the warm flagstones of the private terrace that overlooked the inner gardens of the Water Gardens. The speckled sandstone of the palace glowed with sleepy color, and the salt-tinged wind rode in over the Dornish sea carrying gull cries and the distant thrum of waves against breakwater. He rolled his shoulders, testing the familiar ache of muscle and tendon, savoring the slight sting beneath the half-healed cut on his left forearm. A souvenir from a spirited duel fought 3 mornings past with a pair of visiting Myrish sellswords. A princely courtesy, he liked to call such bouts. The kind of courtesy that left a man remembering Dorne and its red viper long after he had sailed for other ports. Oberyn drew a deliberate breath through his nose, tasting the scent of blooming lemon trees and the fainter whisper of white pepper. Somewhere in the garden below, larks began their morning chatter. Beyond the palace walls, a new summer pressed itself upon the peninsula, promising days of shimmering heat and nights of heavy, perfumed darkness. For most men it was a season to grow languid, but for Oberyn Martell it was the hour of sharpening, of thought and of steel. At 41 he felt his life coiling into decisive form, his days narrowing toward something that tasted of revenge and revelation in equal measure. Vengeance for Elia remained the oldest iron in his blood, and yet, of late, he felt another current drawing him northward, inexplicable as the pull of deep water. He heard the quiet pad of bare feet behind him and did not turn. Ellaria Sand draped her arms over his shoulders, her cheek pressing against the sweat-damp nape of his neck. She wore only a loose linen robe, open to the warm air, and her skin smelled of crushed mint leaves and sweet orange oil. "You are awake before the sun today," she murmured. "I wanted to feel it rise," he said, touching her hand where it rested across his collarbone. "It seemed important, though the gods know why. The gods rarely trouble themselves to explain," Ellaria replied, smiling against his skin. "You slept poorly." Oberyn gave a one-shouldered shrug. "Dreams, nothing more." I saw Elia's face, shattered and whole, both at once, and above her, the wall stretching to the sky, glittering like blue glass. Then the dream bled away into ravens. Ellaria slipped around him, brown curls spilling over one shoulder, and met his eyes. "Ravens from King's Landing, perhaps?" He nodded toward the low cedar table beside the terrace doors. Upon it lay a sealed scroll, the wax and angry Lannister crimson. It arrived at first light. It seems even lions have learned to brave Dornish dawns. Ellaria's lips thinned. "Bad news." "News enough." Oberyn reached for the scroll but did not break the seal. Instead, he turned it over in his fingers, studying the faint imprint of a lion's head. "Tyrion Lannister's mark." The imp writes in his own hand. "Curiosity will make you read it," she said, brushing dust from his forearm. "If not now, then after breakfast." "Curiosity or something stronger," he agreed. "It was always Tyrion who interested me, not the Golden Kingling or his serrated little mother." Ellaria touched the fresh scar on his arm. "What could the imp want with the Red Viper? Perhaps he offers me a place at his sister's table." Oberyn let out a soft laugh. "But Lannister feasts tend to end poorly for Martells." "Then refuse." "I might," he said, feeling the weight of decision gather like storm heat in the air. "But I should know what I am refusing." His eyes wandered back to the east, to the desert haze forming on the horizon beyond Sunspear's spear-tipped towers. "It is not only Elia's blood that calls me now, Ellaria. Something stirs in the north. Something cold and wide as the sky. And my dream showed me a face there, pale as moonlight, crowned in dark snow." "The boy commander," Ellaria whispered, remembering tales carried south with the swifter Carracks. "A bastard of Eddard Stark, risen from steward to Lord Commander of the Night's Watch before 20. Jon Snow." Oberyn's pulse beat harder beneath skin warm as sun-baked stone. "Yes, Jon Snow." He tasted the name, as one tastes a sword point before a duel. Cold, bright, promising wonder and pain. "I have never met him, yet I feel our fates have begun to thread together. He is said to bear the Stark look, black of hair and gray of eye. But there are other rumors in the royal court. Whispers that say bastard blood sometimes hides deeper roots. Ellaria frowned. You are thinking of Lyanna. I am thinking of Rhaegar, Oberyn returned, voice suddenly soft, and of echoes that might remain in a boy grown to a man upon the wall. You would stake your course on rumors? She asked, though her tone held no disbelief, only the careful trepidation a lover feels when storms gather inside another's soul. I would stake everything on the scent of truth, he said, lifting the scroll and turning toward the palace. And I would sooner trust rumors than Lannister promises. But sometimes both ride in the same carriage, and only the careful I can spy which carries the dagger and which the purse. A single candle burned low in his study when Oberyn at last broke the crimson seal. The wax crumbled like dried blood beneath his thumb, and the scroll unfurled with a papery hiss. Tyrion's precise, slanted hand greeted him, black ink on cream vellum, a wry, unhurried script that suggested a man sipping wine by lamplight, his thoughts as sharp as the blade of a Braavosi stiletto. Oberyn read, Prince Oberyn of House Martell, if our mutual love of honesty permits plain speech, let me begin by confessing that letters bore me nearly as much as the courtiers who write them. Yet one cannot always trust the tongues of ravens to carry nuance, and so I risk ink. King's Landing is not well, though gold plates its walls and summer still warms. The Blackwater rush. The crown labors beneath debt, rumor, and a queen's growing list of enemies. My sister believes power rests upon fear alone. I remain unconvinced, and I suspect you share my doubts. Fear is a gaudy banner, but wind and time fray all banners. You seek justice for your sister. I seek something rarer, the survival of a realm. Caught between the cold north and the hot south, between dead men who walk, and vengeful men who never quite died. I write, therefore, not as a lion nor as the king's hand, but as a man who would rather drink with a red viper than bleed before one. Come to King's Landing. Bring your spear, your wits, and, if you dare, your curiosity. The game grows strange, and we shall both lose if the board is flipped by colder hands than ours. Tyrion of House Lannister. Oberyn read the lines once, then twice, sensing the true message labored to hide between witty turns and half-jesting phrasing. The realm is not well. Dead men walk, colder hands, the language of secrets, austere and urgent. He leaned back, the candle casting a molten halo around the rim of his wine cup. The imp plays at truth, he mused, yet he knows more than he writes. Ellaria reclined upon a velvet chaise, legs tucked beneath her, a volume of Rhoynish poetry forgotten in her lap. He invites you into a nest of vipers. I am a viper, Oberyn reminded her, sipping wine. The Dornish red tasted of dark cherries ripped open beneath summer sun. Better to dine with kin than strangers. You joke, she said, but I smell something fierce in you tonight. You would fly to the capital if the winds favored. Perhaps, he admitted. Yet another wind compels me more strongly. Oberyn traced a finger along the vellum. The imp speaks of the north not with Lannister scorn but with dread. He is afraid of something no gold can bribe. And the north is ruled by crows, by a boy made man far too soon. Ellaria closed her book. 1,000 leagues lie between Sunspear and the wall, and winter marches faster than any ship. Then we sail at once, he said. The words surged unbidden, but felt sudden and right as the bite of steel into flesh. Not to King's Landing, Tyrion can wait, but to White Harbor, then by land to Winterfell, then to the Wall. We will discover what stirs there, and perhaps find a prince among the bastards. Ellaria's brows lifted. And Elaya's blood? Oberyn smiled without mirth. If the North holds the key to vengeance, so be it. Fire is not the only coin of retribution. Ice can score as deep. He rose, muscles coiled beneath sun-browned skin, and crossed to a tall, shuttered window. Throwing it wide, he let hot wind fill the room, snapping the curtains like banners. Dawn had become full morning. Bells chimed across Sunspear's plazas, calling small folk to market. Somewhere far beyond sight, caravans prepared for the long march across the Prince's Pass, and ships unfurled canvas in Slaver's Bay. But the road he chose lay beyond them all, up where the world narrowed into chill and shadow. "Send word to my sisters," Oberyn said, voice low. "Obara remains at the Tor. She will mind our house. Nymeria keeps watch in the market courts of Volantis. Let her wait a few weeks longer. As for Tyene, best she remain in the September in King's Landing a while longer and braid the Queen's nerves into knots. I will not have my spears scattered blindly while I ride north." Ellaria stood, crossing the room with languid steps that belied the flicker of worry behind her dark eyes. "And me," he caught her hands. "You ride with me, of course. The wall will tremble at your laughter before winter's done." Ellaria's unease cracked into a grin. "Then let us pack furs. I have always wanted to see snow." "Snow you shall see," he said, picturing Jon's name written upon a banner of white storm. "Perhaps snow shall see us both." 6 days later, under a sky the color of polished bronze, the Golden Feather slipped its moorings at Planky Town and glided into the Torrentine's broad mouth. The cog was new-built, its hull lined with spicewood and caulked with pitch thick as molasses. 50 oars beat in slow concert, rising and falling to the steady whistle of the shipmaster. A triangular lateen sail bore the red sun and spear of House Martell, trailing ripples in its wake across water tinged ruby by the setting sun. Oberyn stood at the prow, arms folded over the high curve of the railing, watching dories and fishing skiffs veer aside for the princely vessel. The wind tugged at his deep indigo cloak, and already he tasted the tang of salt beyond the river's span. Ellaria leaned beside him, hair braided back, her gown a simple wrap of saffron silk. "You did not bid farewell to Doran." "My brother knows all farewells become greetings if the sea is kind," Oberyn said, though he had left Sunspear at dawn without waking the Prince of Dorne. Doran's health waned like a pale candle, and sympathy sat ill with Oberyn's restless blood. Besides, Doran sees more from his balcony than most men see from horseback. "He will know my mind soon enough." "And what do you see now?" Ellaria asked. He followed the stretch of river until it widened into the summer sea. Flock upon flock of gulls wheeled overhead, white wings stark against burnished clouds. "I see a kingdom writhing beneath soft corrosion. The Lannisters war on shadows, the Starks bleed in darkened halls, and dragons flicker half-born across the narrow sea. But I also see opportunity, a thread of destiny thick enough even for a viper to climb. And Jon Snow is the spindle? Perhaps." He flexed his fingers against the rail. "If rumor is true, if Rhaegar's blood flows in him, then he stands at the crossroads of every song Elia once loved." His voice hushed. "And of her murder." Ellaria traced a fingertip over the dragonbone hilt of the dagger at his belt. "You dream of alliance with a northern bastard against Lannisters, yet the very same man may be Rhaegar's son. Will that soothe your hunger for vengeance, or feed it?" Oberyn's smile bared teeth. "If he carries Rhaegar's blood, he carries Elia's by marriage, and my sister's ghosts will follow him wherever he rides. I would see where those ghosts lead." The horizon swallowed the last of the sun, leaving only a thin, bruised line of violet. As twilight gathered, torches guttered to life along the deck, and sailors murmured prayers to the Lady of Waves. Oberyn remained at the prow long after Ellaria retired below, his eyes fixed northward where darkness thickened, imagining the wall, a colossal scar of ice bisecting his mind. He saw Jon there, dark-haired silhouette upon crenellations, watching for something older than crowns. Far to the north, Castle Black shivered beneath a sky of seething gray. The wind that screamed over the wall tasted of tin and stone, and the sun, when it deigned to appear, sagged like a bloodshot eye above jagged peaks. Jon Snow stood alone atop the king's tower, cloak snapping in staggered gusts, hands clasped behind his back. Below, the courtyard bustled with a scrim of activity. Black-clad brothers stacking firewood, stable hands mucking stalls, the clang of hammer on anvil from the forge. Yet the noise seemed distant, muffled by the relentless roar of wind. Ghost padded beside him, white fur rippling. The direwolf's ears remained erect, nose twitching as though he scented thunder. Jon laid a hand upon Ghost's ruff, drawing momentary comfort from the beast's steady strength. A scrap of parchment fluttered in his free hand, its edges curling damp in the cold. He glanced at it again, the 9th letter from Sam in as many weeks, carried by Raven from the Citadel in Old Town. News of ancient glyphs, of maesters bickering over Obsidian's properties, of queer references to dragonglass and songs of snow and spear. Yet it was the final line that clung like burrs to Jon's thoughts. I have translated a passage that speaks of a crimson viper bearing winter's vengeance. I do not know its meaning, but the maester scoffed loudly enough that I trust it must be important. I shall write more when I can. Jon folded the parchment, sliding it into the inner pocket of his jerkin. He exhaled, breath misting. A crimson viper. Absurd, perhaps, a metaphor for some doom of ice. Yet stranger words had proven true. White walkers stalking in forests, corpses rising at Hardhome. He scanned the southern horizon where the King's Road vanished beyond foothills, wondering what forces stirred in the world below. Footsteps behind him, light, unhurried. He recognized them before turning. "Ser Davos," he greeted, pulling his cloak tighter. The Onion Knight halted a respectful pace away, gloved hands clasped. Frost-white stubble coated his jaw. "Lord Commander," Davos said with a nod. "Melisandre sends word. She dreams of a shadow draped in scales, with eyes like rubies, striking at the neck of a lion. She thought you'd want to know, given your fondness for worrying over portents." Jon couldn't help a small smile. "If I worried over every red woman's dream, I would never sleep." "True enough," Davos conceded, stepping up beside him. Below, the wall loomed like a trapped horizon. "But I've learned better than to ignore such mutterings. I once sailed beneath black sails because of a shadow's promise, and that choice cost me sons, and won me wars." Jon's gaze drifted across the frosted sprawl of Castle Black. A viper, a dragon shadow, lions. We live amid sigils come to life. I only hope they serve men's causes, not the other way around. Davos chuckled, the sound soft and tired. "A hope worth guarding, my lord." Stannis would have said the same, though in sterner words. He paused. "The wildlings grow restless. Tormund worries about the food stores. If winter deepens, they'll need better shelter than tents at Hardhome, else you'll have a riot. We'll open more cells beneath the North Tower," Jon said. "Move the infirmary into Maester Aemon's old quarters. As for food, Salty, Harwoodfell's crew, brought salt cod last week. It will stretch a month if men behave." "Men seldom do," Davos said wryly. "Especially hungry ones." Jon glanced south again. Perhaps answers ride toward us even now. He did not know why he said it, except that the wind carried a scent, alien, spiced, amid the usual cold tang. Something stirred beyond the mountains. The Golden Feather's voyage unfolded like the slow unrolling of a tapestry. After crossing the summer sea to Lys, where Oberyn spent 2 nights in a perfumed house whose garden boasted violets the size of small cups, the cogs slipped through the stepstone's hidden channels, evading pirates by hugging reefs known only to Dornish captains. Past Tyrosh, they entered the open narrow sea, catching a brisk northern wind that puffed the lateen sails proud as trumpets. Each dawn saw the sky shift, from searing Dornish blue to Tyroshi jade, from murky green off Mere to a washed pewter mirror as they neared Driftmark. Sea mists thickened, and gull cries grew shriller. During long stretches at sea, Oberyn practiced forms upon the quarterdeck, a spear in each hand, feet sliding over planks slick with brine. Sailors paused to watch the prince spin and lunge, his cloak billowing like a wine-dark banner. At night, he dined on roasted sea bass and pomegranates with Ilaria in the captain's cabin. Maps spread between them. They traced their route north, past King's Landing, through Blackwater Bay, skirting Cracklaw Point, then up the coast to White Harbor where Lord Manderley's ships enforced tariffs but tolerated southern coin. From there they would ride, east around the Bight, then into the stark green of the Wolfswood and north along the King's Road. Illyria studied the inked coastline, finger lingering over the stylized lion of the capital. We pass so close to King's Landing and yet do not dock. Too near the lion's den, Oberyn said. Tyrion's wine may be sweet, but his sister's poisons are sweeter. We travel for the north. King's Landing can wait. He did not add that he sensed a greater fate shaping, one demanding speed. Nightly now, the dream returned. A wall of ice lit by blue-white fire, a boy of dark curls standing beside a pale direwolf, while overhead a viper of vivid red scaled wings soared against swirling snow. Sometimes Elia's voice echoed, half-heard, singing of dragons forged in the icy forge of winter. Oberyn awoke each dawn with skin tingling and breath quick. After a fortnight, the golden feather rounded Massey's hook and caught a current that sped them north like an arrow. On the 20th day, White Harbor's granite walls rose ahead, moon-pale under cloudy sky. The harbor teemed with Myrish galleys, crabbing boats, and knuckle-proud Northman longships adorned with snarling wolf heads. Salt spray made the air taste like iron. Oberyn stood at the prow in full armor, scaled bronze gorget, supple leather jerkins dyed rust red, spear across his back, while Illyria wore a fur-lined mantle of silver fox over her sand-colored gown. A harbor officer hailed them, shocked to see Dornish colors this far north. Oberyn paid customs fees with a velvet purse heavy with silver stags bearing Robert's crude face. Word of the prince's arrival rippled through the wharves, drawing gawkers. Fishermen in sealskin cloaks, merchants thick as walruses in wool doublets, whores with salt-stiffened skirts. Some spat at the sight of Dornish sun and spear. Old grudges die slow in winter soil, but most only stared, curious. That night, Oberyn petitioned an audience with Lord Wyman Manderly. The portly lord, famed for pies big enough to drown a duck-hole, received tea. Hem in the great hall of Newcastle, a chamber that smelled of pine resin and roasted boar. Tapestries hung depicting white wolves chasing red deer across snow. Manderly wore a cloak of blue velvet trimmed in ermine and greeted Oberyn with exaggerated courtesy that could not hide wary eyes. Southern princes were rare visitors, and rarer still those who came bearing only two companions, Illyria and Maester Caliot, whom Oberyn had coaxed from Sunspear for medical counsel. Over cups of mulled mead, Oberyn spoke plainly. I ride for the wall to meet with Lord Commander Jon Snow. I ask only fresh horses and a guide who knows the King's Road. Manderly's jowls quivered around a polite smile. I confess surprise, my prince. Dorne stands nearer Old Town's shining spires than Castle Black's frozen ramparts. Princes are allowed their curiosities, Oberyn said, sipping mead, and vengeance seldom follows straight roads. Manderly's eyes glimmered. Vengeance is a heavy saddle on a long ride. Oberyn inclined his head. Heavier still when the road leads home again. After a moment, the Lord of White Harbor signaled a steward. You shall have horses and a guide. The North remembers debts of hospitality. Illyria watched Oberyn throughout, reading the silent currents. Later, in their guest chambers, she whispered, The fat lord all but trembled. Does he fear Lannister wrath? He fears what every man fears, uncertainty. Oberyn loosened the ties of his jerkin. The North is wounded, Illyria. The Starks lie scattered like bones. Yet something still beats in these halls. Acuiad drum. He did not speak the phrase that thrummed inside him. The North remembers. A vow, a promise, perhaps a threat, but also the soil where alliances grew. Their journey from White Harbor to Winterfell proved slower than Oberyn wished. Spring melt had swollen rivers, turning fords into boiling torrents. They detoured east toward Hornwood, where Lady Hornwood's castellan lent them a ramshackle ferry, not much more than logs chained together. The crossing consumed a day, though Oberyn spent the hours sparring barefoot on the riverbank with Arno Talltree, the long-limbed guide provided by Manderly. Talltree handled an axe well enough, but Oberyn's spear flickered past the Northman's guard time after time, tapping ribs and thighs. The Northerner took each bruise with stoic humor, remarking that Dornish rain tasted better than Dornish jabs. Illyria rode alongside Oberyn on a chestnut mare, her fur-lined hood framing a face flushed by cold. She asked thoughtful questions of Talltree, the state of winter wheat, rumors of Boltons in the Dreadfort, bandit sightings near the lonely hills. The guide answered in spare sentences. All roads, it seemed, bent toward Winterfell's new lords, House Bolton favored by Lannister decree. But small folk spoke louder of the Night's Watch and their new Lord Commander, a stark bastard risen from the ashes, who opened gates to wildlings and spoke of dead men marching. Oberyn filed every scrap away, shaping them against his growing theory. By the time they reached the King's Road south of Last River, he felt more certain than ever. Jon Snow was the axe blade poised to split the realm, if shaped by the right hand. On the 30th morning from White Harbor, Winterfell's towers rose into view, blackened by flaking soot yet stubbornly erect against a sky of swirling snow. Reek of burnt wood still hung in the air years after Ramsay Bolton's sack, though carpenters swarmed the bailey erecting new palisades. Bolton banners snapped over ramparts. Pink flayed men on Sanguine Field, a sigil Oberyn found as vile as a slaver's brand. Guards in quilted pink cloaks eyed the Dornish company, hands upon crossbow triggers. Their reception by Lord Roose Bolton proved chilly. The pale-eyed lord greeted Oberyn in the great hall beside a hearth that gave little warmth. Roose's voice never rose above a murmur, yet each syllable slid like iced steel. He allowed them bread and salt, no more. Oberyn played the courteous guest, concealing his disgust. He read cruelty in Ramsay Snow's sidelong grin, and hunger in Roose's narrowed gaze. When Ramsay asked after Dornish bastards in a tone too gleeful, Oberyn smiled politely and spoke of the Dornish custom of raising bastards at court, much to Ramsay's visible disappointment. Illyria later whispered that the bastard of Bolton looked at her as a butcher appraises a carcass. Oberyn assured her the flayer would lose his hands before such gaze turned to touch. They left Winterfell next dawn, hearts lighter for each hoofbeat that carried them away from pink banners. Crossing the Bar Rollins, they joined a trickle of traders heading north laden with salt pork and lamp oil for the watch. Ravens circled above the King's Road, croaking omens. Snow fell more often now, thick flakes that melted upon sand-colored cloaks only to freeze against bronze armor. Oberyn studied the shifting gray sky, feeling the weight of history tightening around his throat like a lover's hand. For days south of the last hearth, they met the first wildling party. Ragged men in furs escorting a wooden cart filled with iron or bound for the forges at Castle Black. Their leader, a tall woman with flame-orange hair and eyes as shrewd as any sellsword's, recognized Oberyn's noble bearing and spat in the snow, declaring she'd never bend knee to southern lords. Yet when she learned he rode to treat with Jon Snow, her hostility thawed. She named herself Sigrid Crow-Eater and warned them of frozen lakes that swallowed horses whole. The wildlings passed by with equal parts scorn and curiosity, and Oberyn watched them trudge south, marveling at how borders shifted like dunes in sandstorm. That night they camped under a ruined watchtower. Illyria huddled beside a small fire, rubbing her gloved hands. "The cold bites deeper each day," she said. "Perhaps you will find me shivering in your furs tonight." Oberyn draped a bearskin over her shoulders. "Gladly I'll share warmth, though come dawn there will be little comfort. Because we near the wall? Because we near answers," he replied, staring into the embers. Castle Black greeted them on the 41st day of their journey. From the King's Road it appeared first as a smudge on the horizon, then a row of grim wooden structures pressed against a cliff of ice. The wall soared, impossible and inhuman, its face a petrified waterfall plunging sheer into clouds. Wind keened through crenellations like flutes carved of bone. At the east gate, black-cloaked sentries barred their way until Jon Snow himself arrived, ghost padding silent at his side. Jon wore mail beneath a thick black wool cloak, the Lord Commander's carved Valyrian steel sword Longclaw sheathed at his hip. His gray eyes fixed on Oberyn with measured caution, but within them flickered recognition of what Oberyn could not yet name. Snow's youth surprised him, only 22 winters, and yet a gravity older than winter's own breath. "My lord," Jon greeted, inclining his head. "Prince Oberyn of Dorne, called the Red Viper," Oberyn said, dismounting. He removed his sand-colored gloves and extended a bare hand. The watch keeps men of all realms safe. This day, I hope to keep the watch safe in turn. Jon clasped the offered hand, his grip firm, skin cold as forged iron. Then you are welcome at Castle Black, Prince. So long as you remember our vows bind us beyond realm and crown. I remember, Oberyn said, holding Jon's gaze. Up close he saw it. The long face, the straight black hair, eyes of ironwood. Stark features, yes. But also something Targaryen lingered in the set of the mouth, the tilt of the brow. A ghost of rigor, perhaps, overlain by northern frost. Jon gestured to the others. Talltree bowed clumsily. Maester Caliot murmured greetings. Illyria removed her hood, dark curls spilling over fur mantle. Jon's glance lingered upon her exotic garb, but he spoke only courtesy, ushering them through the gate. Inside, Castle Black bustled with an energy Oberyn had not expected. Wildlings stacking timber, black brothers training archers, women in furs hauling sacks to the granary. Fires crackled in braziers, casting golden flecks upon weather-gray walls. Over it all loomed the wall, its ice face groaning deep as a dying leviathan. Jon led them to the King's Tower. Inside the high-roofed hall, benches brimmed with maps, obsidian daggers, scrolls tied in string. A single black iron brazier fought the chill. Wine, Jon offered. If it warms, Oberyn said. Jon poured sour red from distant arbor into wooden cups. Oberyn tasted it, thin but serviceable. Jon studied him across the rim of his cup. Few southern lords brave the King's Road in winter. Fewer still Dornishmen. I have always preferred roads others shun, Oberyn replied. And I come not as lord but as hunter of truths. What truth lies at Castle Black? The one you carry in your blood, Oberyn said softly. He laid 2 fingers upon the table, tapping once, then twice, like a drum summoning memory. I knew your uncle. Prince Rhaegar was a man who listened more than he spoke. When he spoke, worlds shifted. Oberyn leaned closer. Tell me, Jon Snow, do you know why a Dornish prince might ride through winter to stand before you? Jon stiffened but did not look away. Ghost growled behind him, hackles up. Yet the Lord Commander raised a hand and the wolf stilled. I know little of princes, Jon said. I know less of my own blood than most men know of theirs. Then let us learn together, Oberyn said. For a storm gathers that will not be answered by Lannister gold or Stark honor alone. Only fire tempered by ice may stand against such night. He lifted his cup. Will you listen? Jon's reply came quiet as fresh snow. I will. And in that simple vow Oberyn felt the first stirrings of alliance, fragile yet potent, like dawn bleeding over the wall. A new color against endless white. Night settled on Castle Black with a chill that crept into bone. In a guest cell lined with rough-hewn pine, Oberyn lay awake beside Illyria, listening to the distant grind of the wall, rehearsing words he would speak come morning. He recalled Tyrion's letter, dead men who walk colder hands. He remembered Sam's note, Crimson Viper, Winter's Vengeance. Dreams and ravens and portents converged here, at the top of the world, beneath frozen moon. Illyria stirred. You tremble like a boy awaiting his first tilt, she teased, voice muffled by furs. I tremble, he admitted, because the board reveals its pieces and I see how few remain to move. Tomorrow you will move one, he exhaled. Tomorrow I must decide if the boy I saw in dreams is the man who can shatter lions, and whether I, a viper, can coil around a wolf's throat without biting. Illyria's hand found his in the darkness. Even vipers know mercy, if it serves purpose. I pray vengeance and mercy bend to one road. He turned toward her, pressing lips to her brow. Outside, the wind howled across ramparts, a hollow wail that seemed at once ancient and newborn. Far above, unseen clouds gathered, and the first heavy snowflakes of the storm began to fall, swirling in ghostly dance around the wall's towering crown. Quiet heralds of thunder yet to break, of fates yet to writhe into shape. The next day broke under a sky the color of hammered lead. Jon Snow called a council in the long hall of the King's Tower. Ser Davos Seaworth, Melisandre robed in crimson, Septon Celador limping from old wounds, Tormund Giantsbane with ruddy beard studded by frost, and a trio of northern chieftains recently arrived to parley. Lady Alice Karstark, Jonel Ryswell, and Willa Mormont no taller than a spear's haft. Oberyn sat beside Ilaria near the fire. Jon paced the length of the hall, cloak trailing, voice calm but edged by urgency. He spoke of patrols disappearing near Eastwatch, of wights glimpsed beyond the shivering sea's frozen shoals, of wildlings whispering of a night king with eyes ablaze. As he spoke, Melisandre's rubies pulsed, casting faint red rainbows over the stone floor. Davos's brows knit. Tormund grunted approval when Jon proposed assembling a ranging party south of the Frostfangs. Oberyn listened, noting the swift respect these disparate leaders gave Jon, born not of fear but hard-earned trust. When Jon finished, he turned to the Dornish prince. "Prince Oberyn has journeyed far to stand with us. Let him speak." Oberyn rose, the hall falling still. Flames crackled. He felt every eye upon him. Northmen suspicious of heat-bred southerners, free folk with little love for princely titles, a red priestess whose faith sang of fire and ash. He drew breath. "I bring no army," Oberyn began, his voice riding clear over the hush. "No dragons smolder in my holdfasts, and no fleets answer my banners. I bring only a spear, a will for justice, and the memory of blood crying for redress." He let the words hang a moment, then went on. "Yet justice is not a southern cause, nor vengeance a Dornish hunger alone. The enemy you face beyond that wall, dead kings and shadow things, cares nothing for lines drawn on maps. It will take north and south, lion and wolf, viper and kraken, to break its advance." A murmur slid through the assembly. Lady Karstark's gaze hardened, but young Willa Mormont nodded vigorously. Oberyn continued, "I have long hated the Lannister name for what was done to my sister Elia, and yet I stand here ready to fight beside a man rumored to carry Lannister blood in his veins as much as Stark." Gasps fluttered. Davos leaned forward. Oberyn met Jon's eyes. "A bastard you may be, Jon Snow, but bastards often forge their own sigils from shattered ones." He raised his spear, glinting copper in firelight. "If you will have me, I offer my blade to the Night's Watch and to your cause, which must become the realm's cause. I will fight the dead, and I will teach your warriors how to dance with spears as the Rhoynar once danced along the Greenblood. In return, I ask only truth, of parentage, of prophecy, of every lie that shackles men to old hatreds while winter devours us all." Jon inhaled, gray eyes shining with something fierce. "You have that truth as far as I can find it," he said. "And you have our welcome." Tormund slapped a table. "Well said, Crow Prince." Willa Mormont grinned. Even Melisandre's scarlet lips curved. Roaring logs sent sparks upward, and Oberyn felt heat bloom against cold stone. The alliance had been spoken into being, viper and wolf against lion, against night itself. That evening, Jon escorted Oberyn up the wall. The lift rattled skyward, chains clanking, cold air cutting like shards of glass. Ghost bounded ahead, nimble upon frosted planks. They rose through blowing snow until the world beneath shrank into toy shapes, steaming chimneys, speckled ant lines of patrol. Then the lift stopped, and they stepped onto the wind-scoured top of the wall. Oberyn drew a slow breath, lungs seared by cold, eyes wide at the immensity. An endless white road curving into gloom, flanked by abyssal drops on either side. The forest to the north appeared a black ocean, treetops swaying like submerged weeds. The sky felt crushingly close, a lid of dark iron touched with faint aurora flickers. Jon walked to the edge. "Here," he said, voice nearly lost to the gale. "Beyond that forest roam the dead, and somewhere out there walks the Night King." Oberyn stood beside him. "Every fortress I have known fancies itself eternal. This wall knows better. It groans with age but stands. And yet even stone heart must break someday. Unless men stand first," Jon said. Oberyn studied him. Snowflakes caught in Jon's hair. His face held both youthful sorrow and implacable resolve. The dream's silhouette stood before Oberyn in flesh and bone. A prince? A bastard? Perhaps both. And perhaps something more, a hinge around which the realm would swing. "I will teach your men the spear," Oberyn said. "I will share poisons that burn white as frostbite. And when the time comes to ride south, I will ride at your side." Jon nodded. "We will. When the wall no longer holds, the fight must go to the living." Oberyn's gaze drifted north once more. Night thickened, and in the swirling snows he thought he saw shapes. Skeletal warriors with eyes of icy blue, walking silently toward them through drifts that swallowed their knees. He blinked, and the vision faded, leaving only darkness. "We have work to do," Oberyn said. "Yes," Jon agreed, "and time grows short." Over the next weeks, Castle Black transformed beneath Oberyn's guiding hand. He drilled wildlings and watchbrothers alike in the Dornish spear dance, a fluid choreography of feints and whirling strikes. Northmen accustomed to heavy axes struggled at first, but soon found rhythm, their breaths steaming in cold air as would half-spun like windmills. Tormund laughed whenever Oberyn tripped him, vowing he would wrestle the prince into snow come spring. Even Dawr Bowen Marsh cracked a rare smile when a young recruit from White Harbor disarmed him with a Dornish sidestep. Illyria oversaw a makeshift infirmary in the old storage loft, using Dornish tinctures of fire milk and ghost pepper to disinfect wounds and stave infection. Maester Caliot consulted with the Watch's healer on brewing stronger mulled wine to fight chill lung, mixing southern ginger with northern pine resin. Cultural grafts took root in frost-hard soil, yet tension simmered. Word of Oberyn's presence spread south, carried by merchants and broken men fleeing winter. In King's Landing, small folk whispered that the Red Viper had traded sand for snow, plotting with stark ghosts to resurrect old rebellions. Cersei raged, ordering ravens north demanding explanations. No answer came. In Dorne, Doran Martell received letters from Illyria describing the prince's bold mission. The Lord of Sunspear, ever cautious, dispatched Quentyn Martell north with treaties sealed in gold wax, though the sands slowed his passage. Farther east, across the narrow sea, dragons circled Meereen's pyramids, and Daenerys Targaryen dreamed of a pale wolf with eyes of ash and a viper coiled about its paws. But at Castle Black, amid ceaseless snow, Oberyn and Jon forged trust each dusk beside the fireplace of Jon Solar, speaking softly while the direwolf dozed at their feet. Oberyn shared memories of Elaya's gentle singing, of Rhaegar's melancholy harp. Jon offered tales of Winterfell's halls, of summer snows and fatherly honor. Slowly, they found a common key: the knowledge of what is lost and the will to guard what remains. One night, as aurora ribbons writhed above the wall, Melisandre entered the Solar unbidden, red gems blazing. "I have seen you both in flames," she said, eyes reflecting firelight. "A sword of dawn and a spear of dusk. Together you strike at a crowned shadow." Jon bristled. "I do not care for prophecy." "Prophecy cares not for you," she replied, gaze shifting to Oberyn. "Nor for you, princeling. Yet it binds you both. Beware the lioness's roar, for it masks deeper fangs." She departed, leaving silence stretched taut. Oberyn exhaled. "The Red Woman plays at riddles." Jon stared into fire. "I have learned to heed her riddles, but never follow blindly." "Wise," Oberyn approved. He sipped mulled wine. "Tell me, Jon, a prophecy binds us. Would you break it?" Jon considered. "I would bend it to serve the living, or else snap it altogether." Oberyn grinned. "Then let us bend steel together." Winter deepened. Snow buried the King's Road neck-deep. Ranging parties vanished beyond Weeping Pass. Ravens from Eastwatch reported ships frozen solid in harbor, sailors entombed in ice. Jon convened his captains: Ser Davos, Tormund, Othel Yarwick, and Oberyn. The time had come to march beyond the wall, to bring the fight to the Night King before his armies gathered in unstoppable tide. Oberyn proposed a plan. A small strike force would slip through the gorge, bypassing the haunted forest, targeting an ancient weirwood grove rumored to hide caches of dragonglass left by the children of the forest. Dragonglass, the only sure weapon against the White Walkers. Jon agreed, naming Oberyn co-commander alongside himself. Some fretted at trusting a Dornish newcomer, but Jon silenced them. The wall has no south and north, only inside and outside. Preparations began. Obsidian daggers were honed, spear points tipped with black glass shaped in Dornish kills erected beside the Watch's old archer ranges. Oberyn oversaw forging, teaching smiths to temper volcanic shards with iron casings. Under torchlight, spearheads gleamed black-violet, sharp as grief. On the eve of departure, Oberyn walked alone along the wall's top. Snow muffled the footfalls of soldiers hurrying below. He paused where the sunset's last glow painted ice a bruised rose. Memory surged. Sunspear at dawn, Illyria's sigh, Tyrion's letter, Elaya's laughter. He felt the world narrowing into one long spear thrust. Everything behind him a steady breath, everything ahead a single point. Illyria joined him, wrapping her arms about his waist. "Tomorrow you ride into frozen forest," she said. "Take a Dornish kiss with you." She pressed lips to his. They tasted of pomegranate seeds and winter wine. Pulling back, she whispered, "Return to me whole." "I shall," he vowed, though he knew vows break against fate like waves on cliff. "And if I do not, remember I died learning truth." "I would rather you live speaking it," she chided, but her eyes shone. Dawn found the strike force gathered in the courtyard. 50 brothers of the Watch, 20 wildlings, 10 spearmen trained by Oberyn, and ghost bounding among horses. Jon wore black mail, long claw at his hip. Oberyn donned bronze-scaled armor over wolf hide, crimson spear in hand, obsidian blade strapped to thigh. Melisandre stood on the steps, chanting in Rhoynar tongue, red fire feathering around her fingers. Snow thickened, falling in sheets. At Jon's command, the gates groaned open, and the party rode north into the blizzard, shapes soon swallowed by white. Illyria watched until the last banner vanished, heard a drumbeat of heat in the icy air. Behind her, Castle Black closed its gates, and with them, the first chapter of a tale that would sweep lord and bastard, viper and wolf, into storms whose names even the old gods had yet to carve upon trees. The wind carved hollows in the drifting snow as the ranging column angled northwest, hugging the shadow of the wall for half a day before veering into the rag-clad pines of the haunted forest. Jon Snow led from the front, Ghost soft-footed at his heel, Longclaw's wolf-pummeled hilt glinting whenever weak sunlight knifed through the branches. Oberyn rode 3 horses back on a supple gelding the color of hammered bronze, spear resting across his knees, catching the smallest tremor in the air like a tuning fork set to battle's pitch. They numbered 82 souls after 2 garrisons from Eastwatch joined them near the ruined watchpost called Greymire. Maester Caliot rode in a covered sleigh piled with medical gear and bundles of dragonglass arrowheads. Illyria walked beside the sleigh whenever the path allowed, her laughter rising white in the frozen air, an improbable music among Northmen who rarely laughed on campaign. Talltree strode ahead of the baggage line with Tormund Giantsbane, swapping tales of walrus hunts and scorpion fights, each tale more absurd than the last until the free folk erupted in guffaws that spooked nearby ravens into black confetti. The first 3 days were mercifully free of incident. At dusk they raised palisade camps, sowing canvas among the roots of ancient oaks. Oberyn spent each evening drilling a 40-man spear corps he called the Viper's Tongue. A line of watch recruits and wildlings alike who had mastered the crossing step and the corkscrew thrust well enough to raise Jon's dark brows in wonder. By torchlight, spears whirled like spokes of a fiery wheel, an art born beneath Dornish suns now reflected in northern flame. On the 4th morning they crossed a glacial creek whose banks steamed in the sudden light. Ice had sheared away overnight, revealing a dark gap beneath. Jon ordered a halt while Yarwick's builders checked the overhang. Oberyn knelt beside the water, fingers brushing the frigid flow, and found a scatter of tiny obsidian shards glimmering like beetle shells. He sifted them onto his palm, struck by how the pieces caught the dawn with a purplish sheen unlike any glass forged in fire. "Dragon's tears," he murmured. Jon crouched beside him, cloak pooling. The children once shaped dragonglass blades in riverbeds warmed by hot springs. Eastwatch maesters found records of forges that ran on nothing but seething mud. Rhaenys would have loved to see such a forge, Oberyn said, surprising himself. He had not spoken Rhaenys' name in years, least of all to a stark-blooded stranger. The memory of the child, barely a bud on life's thorn-choked stem, tightened his throat. Jon's gaze softened. Your sister's daughter. My niece, Oberyn agreed, letting the shards spill back into the water. Elia said her laughter sounded like bells in spring. I never heard it myself. I was on campaign when she was born. War often steals the best of time before it steals life. Jon's face clouded, as though he too sifted lost kin through frost. You rode north to keep that from happening again. To someone, Oberyn said, rising. Vengeance is a cold diet. I have feasted on it long enough. Perhaps I hunger now for something warmer. They moved out by mid-morning, skirting a low range of hills called the Barrow Teeth. Snow thickened to the knee, horses labored, breath pluming like steam engines. Around noon, the advance scouts returned with grim news. A hunter's camp ahead, bodies frozen in postures of flight, faces riven into grisly rictus. Jon led a detail forward. The camp's 5 hides still fluttered from bent poles. A thin smear of ash lay where the cook fire had been. The corpses closest to the fire were half charred, as though they had crawled into the coals to escape something colder than flame. Their eyes, what remained, held the milked glaze of white dawn, but no blue fire. Oberyn knelt by the nearest, its torn cloak bearing a crude sunburst. Tro chieftains use that mark, Tormund said, spitting. Killers and reavers even before the dead rose. Someone beat the Night King to them, Davos observed, towing a splintered spear shaft. Ilaria studied the corpses from a prudent distance. Cut marks on the wrists, near clean. Someone harvested their hands. Jon's mouth tightened. The Night King sometimes takes only the corpses he can raise. But these bodies are burned. Burned sloppily, yes, but burned. Oberyn rose. And yet no blood trails. Something killed them clean. Stacked them here, started a fire, then left before the flames took proper hold. Tormund's beard bristled. A skirmish band of thens might butcher enemies to steal boots, but they don't half-burn corpses. Half measures waste meat. Davos crouched near a scattered pile of broken arrows. Look at the fletching. Goosefeather white with a single red quill. Karstark make. Karstarks march south of the wall, Jon said. No license to hunt free folk, let alone burn them. Perhaps license from another lord, Oberyn suggested, meeting Jon's troubled gaze. Or perhaps fear. Men fearing whites make poor choices. They dismounted that evening under ponderous silence. Jon ordered extra perimeter watches. Oberyn drilled his spear core with renewed ferocity, weaving them through torchlit pines until sweat steamed through wool and mail. He demanded precision, turning missteps into lessons, lessons into instinct. When the session ended, men collapsed against tree trunks, chests heaving, but their eyes shone with something fierce, confidence born from surviving a dance at the edge of exhaustion. Later, around the command fire, Davos unrolled a tattered scrap recovered from the hunter camp, a child's drawing in ash and charcoal, depicting a white circle ringed by jagged black spikes. In the center, a stick figure crowned with antlers of ice. It's the mark they leave, Jon whispered. Spirals, circles, symbols older than tongues. Children of the forest draw circles, Melisandre murmured, appearing suddenly at Davos's shoulder. The ruby at her throat flickered. The Night King steals many things, even shapes of worship. Oberyn eyed her warily. And what shape does Lawler steal, priestess? Fire steals nothing, she answered, smiling faintly. It merely reveals. Ghost growled, hackles bristling. Jon laid a calming hand upon the direwolf. Enough riddles. We march at dawn. Sleep came grudgingly. Oberyn lay beneath firs, staring at the bleak canopy, listening to pine trees creak like hull planks. Illyria's steady breathing beside him soothed some edge of nerves, yet dreams stalked him anew. Elia walking through black snow, her hands warm, her face whole, whispering words he could not hear. Behind her towered Jon Snow, eyes like twin moons, a sword of pale flame in each hand. Then the dream shattered beneath a scream that was neither human nor beast. He woke before first light, the forest shrouded in a silence thick as wet wool. The guards stood tense, eyes sweeping the gloom. Snow fell languidly, flakes wide as moth wings. Oberyn rose, strapped bronze cuirass over wool, cinched sand-colored cloak, and prepared for another day's push. They advanced deeper into the haunted forest, using a frozen creek bed as a natural corridor. Pines gave way to weirwood stands, twisted albino trunks, red leaves clinging despite the season's cruelty. Eyes carved in the bark wept sap like congealed blood. Jon halted before one such tree, pressing gloved fingers to the knot mouth as though greeting an old friend. He murmured something in the old tongue taught him by a child of the forest years earlier. The wind answered with a hush. At midday, tall trees signaled a halt atop a low rise. Beyond lay a broad dell dominated by a stone circle half buried in snow. 12 megaliths tilting inward like silent watchers. In the circle's heart lay an iron-bound chest the size of a coffin, rimed with hoarfrost. Dragonglass blades, Jon had hoped, stored by the children. But as they approached, a long shadow detached from behind the farthest standing stone. It unfurled into a white walker, tall and gaunt, skin pale as moonlit milk, armor of frost-streaked ice plates clinking softly. Blue fire smoldered in abyss-deep eyes. The company froze, breath stilled, hearts hammered. Oberyn's pulse steadied into a predator's calm. He beckoned his spear core forward with 2 quick twirls of his weapon. Jon signaled archers to knock dragonglass-dipped arrows. Tormund hefted a double-bladed axe, muttering a prayer to snow gods he claimed not to worship. The walker raised an arm. Snow about its feet rippled, and 8 cadaverous forms breached the drifts. Wights clad in tatters of then armor, flesh peeling, mouths yawning silent obedience. At their front shambled a massive, antler-sprouting elk corpse, gore-matted fur crunching with ice. Jon's voice rang, "Archers!" A volley of black glittering shafts shrieked across the dell. 2 struck the walker square in the chest. The creature's torso shattered into shards of rime, the blue fires guttering out. The wights faltered, but only for a heartbeat. The elk barreled forward, ice-clacking hooves pounding frozen loam. Oberyn charged to meet it. His spear point flashed obsidian, slicing an arc that clipped the beast's neck. A spray of frozen blood hissed. The elk crashed, momentum carrying both prince and corpse into a tumble. Oberyn rolled clear, felt ribs protest, sprang to feet in time to see Jon cleave a wight from clavicle to pelvis with Longclaw's Valyrian edge. The spear core locked into a chevron beneath Oberyn's shouted cadence. Red sand, white death. Thrust, withdraw, pivot. Bronzed shafts struck throats and eye sockets, obsidian splitting bone as though mere ice. Each thrust erupted into a phantom frost flare as necrotic magic evacuated. Illyria darted between ranks, short blades of carved glass singing, severing tendons behind knees. Ghost tore a wight's throat, shook once, released as the corpse crumpled. Tormund grappled 2 at once, bellowing, until arrows from Davos ended their twitching. Moments stretched into a grinding blur. When silence settled at last, snow lay churned, corpses shattered, the standing stones spattered by an inkblot of melted frost. The chest in the center remained sealed. Jon knelt, brushed snow from the ancient iron. "Help me!" Oberyn joined him. Together they pried up the lid. Inside, rows of obsidian spearheads and daggers slept in nests of wolfskin. At the bottom lay 3 small glass spheres, black, polished, faintly warm despite the cold. Dragon eggs, Oberyn wondered. Jon lifted one sphere. No seams, no handles, just a smooth apple-sized orb. Within, flecks of red flared like embers before fading.
Jon exhaled fog.
Not eggs. Firebombs, perhaps. Maester Aemon described such relics. Dragonflame captured in glass. Oberyn's grin was thin. A welcome trick against foes made of winter. They distributed the blades among spear corps and archers, sealing the remaining orbs in padded satchels. Maester Caliot catalogued each piece in neat Valyrian glyphs. That night, campfires burned within the stone circle. The fallen walker's shards had already sublimated into mist by dusk's first star, as though never there. Melisandre walked the perimeter, trailing a finger of flame along each menhir, intoning in tongues older than Valyria. Sparks clung to the stone, forming runes that glowed a sullen crimson before bleeding into nothing. Jon convened officers near the largest menhir. We achieved the first goal, dragonglass supply, but the Night King knows we venture deep and knows who leads us. His gaze flicked to Oberyn. He will strike harder. Good, Tormund said, wiping blood from beard. Let the dead try and wrestle me again. Bold, Davos said, until they come with giants. We cannot hold the circle, Jon decided. At dawn we march south by southwest, cross the Shatters Pass, and return to the wall before snows close the gorge. Oberyn nodded, though he sensed reluctance swirl among soldiers who smelled victory. Speed breeds survival, he said. 20 more like today and we'll have no strength left to climb the ice. You speak truth, Jon agreed. Over late stew, Oberyn spoke quietly with Melisandre. The priestess stared at the fire, eyes reflecting dancing flames. The glass you found glows under King's blood, she said. But if King's blood awakens it, whose blood may wield it? Prince's blood, Oberyn asked. Or bastards, she replied, gaze flicking toward Jon's silhouette pacing beyond the fire. Bastard of two thrones. Oberyn felt spine prickle. He is not ready to know. Neither are you, she whispered. Yet truth burns, Prince. Fire cares not for readiness. She drifted away, robes whispering over snow. Oberyn poured mulled spirits, offered a cup to Davos, who accepted with nod of thanks. They sipped in silence, watching sparks will into black. Near midnight, Ellaria slid beside Oberyn on the log. She leaned into him. You bleed through every breath, husband. Drink. She pressed the wineskin. He drank, warmth unfurling. Did you see the walker die? I saw blue light crack when your men speared it. He exhaled. Beauty, even in death. Beauty is not what I seek north of reason, she said. But I see why you came. She touched his cheek. Your sister would be proud. He closed his eyes. I pray her name lingers on the wind when this is done. Dawn's gray found them breaking camp, leaving the stone circle to its memories. Snow fell thicker now, heavy wet flakes that hampered visibility. They strung rope between riders and infantry to prevent disarray. Ghosts scouted ahead, a white phantom in white world. Mid-morning, scouts returned with warnings, a host of whites trailing them like silent storm clouds. Jon quickened pace. By noon, the host was visible. Hundreds of dead, jerked forward by unseen puppet strings, flanked by hulking shapes. Ice bears lumbering on paws swathed in rime. Above them glided undead ravens, eyes blue pinpricks. They heard us, Davos muttered. Toward the gorge, Jon realized. They mean to trap us against cliffs. Oberyn scanned options. West lay a ravine too steep. East, dense pine that could funnel them. South, back to the wall, but still 5 days' hard march. We must slow them, he said. A rearguard. I'll lead it, Jon started, but Oberyn cut him off. No. The watch needs its commander at Castle Black. I will take 20. Ellaria grabbed his wrist. Not without me. Without you, he said softly. Someone must bear word if I fail. She stared, breath trembling, then pressed her brow to his. You won't fail. Jon's jaw tightened. I can't demand this. You need not. Oberyn strapped the obsidian-edged spear across back. He called his volunteers, 10 watch brothers from his spear corps, including tall Rusty Miles and Kegs, 3 wildlings led by Sigurd Crow-Eater, 5 Eastwatch archers, and Tall Tree. Davos insisted on staying with Jon, but gifted Oberyn his last 3 dragonglass daggers. They split at a fork marked by a felled pine. Jon clasped Oberyn's arm. "Hold until dusk, then fall back through the blind man's hollow. We'll leave cairn markers. 7 hells and Royn's ghosts guide you," Oberyn said. "May your spear never tire." The main column pushed south, swallowed by swirls of snow. Oberyn's 20 took position on a ridgeline overlooking a narrow bottleneck where the creek threaded between twin boulders. They felled saplings to make spear traps, spread pitch-soaked cloth on the ground, and strung tripwires of gut just above snow level. Archers coated dragonglass arrowheads in lamp oil, all while heavy silence pressed on them, broken only by ghostly caws overhead. Early afternoon, the dead arrived. A mile-wide wave of bodies, eyes blazing blue, limbs jerky but relentless. Oberyn's pulse slowed. He signaled archers. "Hold. Wait." Snow muffled the footfalls until the first rank hit the creek bed. At 20 yards, he dropped his torch onto the pitch. Flame roared, a curtain of orange fury. Archers loosed. Obsidian darted like midnight meteors. Whites collapsed, disintegrating before they touched fire. The ice bears reared, bellowing steam. One surged through flame, fur ablaze, smashing into spear lines. Rusty Miles plunged his iron-shod spear beneath its jaw. The bear convulsed, crashed in a heap that hissed and steamed. Still the dead advanced. Oberyn spun, spear flicking impossible angles, each impact blooming frostfire. He shouted Rhoynar commands. His men answered with unified thrusts. The traplines tripped ragleg whites into pits where archers finished them. Hours blurred. Twice they fell back to secondary positions, lighting new flame walls. Snow became slush streaked with ash. The dead mounted corpses of their fallen, ladders of flesh clambering over barricades. They came without fear, wave on wave, driven by unseen will. By late afternoon, Oberyn's 20 were 10. Kegs bled from a leg torn by skeletal hound. 2 Eastwa. Tsh archers lay motionless, throats ripped open. Taltry's axe arm dangled useless, bone cracked, but the dead thinned. The ice bears lay in smoldering ruin. Blue-eyed birds plummeted, wings scorched. As sun dipped behind iron clouds, a horn echoed from south, the watch's high clarion. Relief column? Oberyn dared hope. Then he saw them. Not brothers, but armored riders galloping through snow, banners crimson gold, the lion of Lannister flapping. At their head rode Ser Adam Marbrand, red cloak snapping. Behind Marbrand came 2 cage wagons lined in steel, hauled by 6 horses. Within each cage, a white walker bound in Valyrian steel shackles that hissed frost. Their eyes blazed unnatural, leashing the whites like hounds. Marbrand raised a gauntlet hand. Trumpet blared. Lannister archers fired glass-tipped bolts, dragonglass, into the dead ranks, but aimed well past Oberyn's lines. Whites toppled. Path opened. Marbrand spurred forward, snow geysering. Oberyn stepped into view, spear leveled. "Turn back, lion." Marbrand reined in. "Prince of Dorne," he called. "His grace demands the Night King's leash cut before winter swallows the realm. We carry these trophies to King's Landing for study." Oberyn laughed, bitter. "Cersei Lannister believes cages tame winter? Better cages than your spear." Marbrand's smile was thin. "Stand Azide." "No." Behind Oberyn, his battered band formed a ragged line, eyes blazing defiance. To their left and right, whites regained footing as the walkers, sensing their captors near, surged with renewed power. Marbrand signaled crossbows. Oberyn twirled his spear, obsidian glinting. "Lions think claws enough. Let me teach you the viper's kiss." He lunged. Chaos erupted. Lannister crossbows fired. Taltry hurled himself into their path, arrows thudding into his chest as he crashed upon 2 riders. Oberyn reached the cage wagon, sprang atop the tongue, and drove his spear between bars into the walker's torso. The glass shattered inside icy ribs. The walker exploded into wind-borne shards. At once, A quarter of the undead host collapsed, puppet strings severed. Marbrand roared, slashing with long sword. Oberyn ducked beneath, swept the blade aside, kicked the knight in the breastplate, sending him sprawling. Ghost burst from the flank, fangs flashing, took a Lannister by the throat. Sigrid Croweater clambered onto the second cage, hacking at lock with axe. Rusty Miles jammed a burning brand through arrow slit, igniting straw bedding. The walker inside shrieked, firelight turning its blue eyes to violet before it too shattered. The remaining wights dropped lifeless. Silence crashed down. Smoke curled from the ruined cage. Horses screamed and bolted. Marbrand rose, helm dented. He gazed at the carnage, disbelief etched in snow-grimed face. Oberyn wiped spearhead against his cloak. "Tell your queen Winter's leash cannot be shipped like Dornish wine." Marbrand spat blood. "She'll hang you. Let her climb the wall to try." Marbrand staggered to a horse, mounted, and fled with 10 surviving riders, leaving dead and dying in drifts. Oberyn's force, now 6, watched them vanish into swirling snow. He felt each wound as though carved on his own flesh. Talltree gasped, eyes glazing. Oberyn knelt, clasped his forearm. "Go to your gods, friend." Talltree smiled, blood freezing at his lips, and went still. Sigrid wiped soot from cheek. "You have the north in you, Dornish." He gripped her shoulder. "And you the south, wildling." Dusk deepened. They gathered what supplies remained, burned corpses, and began limp south toward the blind man's hollow. Stars flickered coldly. In Castle Black's library, Melisandre knelt before a brazier, ruby blazing. Flames writhed into shapes of weirwood spirals and crumbling lions. She whispered, "He bleeds and yet lives. The fire bends." Jon Snow paced outside, fist clenched. The relief horn had found no trace of the rearguard yet. He feared the worst. Ghost, returned hours earlier stained in Lannister blood, whined at the door. When Oberyn's company stumbled through the outer gate well past midnight, Jon met them in the yard. He counted heads, 6. His heart sank, then lifted when he saw Oberyn upright, spear dragging, blood streaking one brow. They clasped arms. "The dead?" Jon asked. "Broken for now," Oberyn rasped. Lannisters in golden armor rode north-bearing caged walkers. "No longer." Jon's eyes widened. "Cersei gambles with death itself." "Better death than Dornish fury?" Oberyn said, though exhaustion threatened to topple him. Alleria reached them, tears freezing in lashes, hands cupping his face. He managed a weary smile before darkness folded him into dreamless sleep. 2 days later, Jon assembled a war council in the Shield Hall. Oberyn, swathed in bandages, stood beside him. Davos spread a map, marking Lannister incursion routes with carved stag tokens. "They possess dragonglass now," Jon said. "Stolen from caches south of the Neck, smuggled by Qyburn's agents." "Let them play with poison," Tormund growled. "Poison spreads," Oberyn warned. "Cersei's alchemists may fashion weapons neither living nor dead can endure." "We must unite the North first," Davos urged. "Karstarks, Manderleys, Ryswells, they sit uneasy under Bolton rule. Roose listens only to whispers from the twins." Jon's eyes hardened. "The Night King marches. I cannot fight him and the Boltons and the Lannisters." "You won't," Oberyn said, spear but tapping floor. "I will ride south to Winterfell, rally those still loyal to Stark honor, expose Bolton crimes, and sever his flayed banners." Jon frowned. "Too dangerous. Roose is cunning." "Cunning falters before truth wielded by a viper," Oberyn replied. "And I will not ride alone. Send a raven to Lady Lyanna Mormont. Her voice carries swords. Free folk will follow Tormund to breach the Dreadfort's kennel gates. Let wildfire meet pink slaughter." Silence hummed, thick with possibility. At last Jon nodded. "Very well. Take what men you need. But we move quickly. The wall cannot hold forever." Oberyn inclined his head. "Then we shall teach it to walk. South of the Neck, in the gilded chambers of the Red Keep, Cersei Lannister slid a jeweled pin through her hair while Qyburn recited reports. Marbrand's failure, lost walkers, Dornish interference. Her green eyes glittered with a storm of wine and spite. "Sensor Gregor," she hissed, voice like cracked glass. "Let the mountain ride north with iron chains and wildfire. Bring me the viper's flayed skin." Qyburn bowed. "And the walker specimens, your grace?" She sipped arbor gold. "Capture more. There is an entire army of corpses at the Night King's back. We need but one. Capturing the living dead bears risk. So does ruling," she snapped. "Yet here I sit." She rose, gown sweeping marble. Outside the balcony, smog choked the Blackwater. Ships on the river flew red sun banners of House Martell. Quentin's envoy waiting harbor entry. Cersei laughed, a brittle chime. "Let the vipers come. King's Landing knows how to crush snakes." She turned to the map table, where tiny lion figurines prowled northern hills toward Winterfell, while a lone serpent carved of garnet wound upwards from Dorne, its ruby eyes set on the wall. In Sunspear, Prince Doran lay in his sandstone bed, listening to desert wind whip against shutters. A servant kneeled, delivering Illyria's raven. Tales of walkers, of alliances, of Oberyn's near death. Doran closed his eyes. Daggers of sunlight pierced through the lattice, casting barred shadows on his frail hands. "My brother wagers with fate," he whispered. "Then so must I." He summoned Tyene Sand, her quiet smile at odds with the coil of tension in her movements. "Gather my banners, child. Send riders along the King's Road bearing grain, spears, and treaties. Issue a call to every house still owing loyalty to Elia's blood." Tyene tilted her head. "We march north." "Not yet," Doran answered, gazing toward horizon. "But winter demands more than words, and Oberyn needs a south wind at his back." Weeks later, Oberyn's company, now 90 riders strong with Karstark deserters and wildling outriders, set across the wintry plains toward Bolton-held Winterfell. Illyria rode at the vanguard, a crimson scarf fluttering beneath wolf-pelt hood, eyes brilliant with purpose. Behind her, banners fluttered. The Dornish sun and spear beside the Stark direwolf stitched hastily by Karstark seamstresses who had torn the flayed man from their own flags. Snow fell, but the rider's breath came hot. Somewhere beyond the hills, flayed men awaited. Somewhere beyond those walls, lions plotted with winter's monsters. Oberyn adjusted the obsidian spear strapped to his back. Ahead lay vengeance remade, justice rekindled, and alliances forged in ice and fire. The road stretched white and silent, but his heart beat to a drum older than path or realm. In its cadence, he heard Elia's song intertwine with Jon's steady voice and Illyria's laughter. The wind carried a distant howl. Dire wolves or white walkers, it was hard to tell. Either would do. He pressed knees to Stallion's flank. The column crested the ridge, and Winterfell's soot-dark towers materialized through flurries like watchful giants. Oberyn Martell bared his teeth to the storm and spurred forward, spearpoint aimed at destiny yet unclaimed. A hard northeast wind bore down on the column as it wound through the chalky hills of the Barrowlands, tearing at banners and peeling heat from every exposed seam of mail. The world was whipcord gray and flat as hammered pewter. The sky lowered so close it felt one could reach up and touch its bruised underbelly. Snowflakes drifted in languid spirals, too sparse to blanket the tufts of iron grass that thrust through the old snowpack, yet enough to sting faces and clog horses' nostrils. Hooves crunched over frozen earth, iron shoes occasionally striking ancient flint chips, sending up sparks that flared and died instantly in the frigid air. Oberyn rode near the van in contemplative silence, the bronze wolf fur cloak cinched tight across his shoulders. Between rhythmic creaks of saddle leather, he listened for the subtle harmonics of a marching host. The scuff of boot soles, the faint clatter of unsecured helm buckles, the hiss of breath slipping past chapped lips. These were a commander's meters, the pulse and percussion of a force edging toward battle. Every so often he drew a shallow lungful through his nose, tasting the astringent perfume of pine sap mingled with the metallic hint that presaged snowfall, and judged how soon the sky might open again. Beside him, Ilaria rode a slender gray mare gifted by Lady Alice Karstark 2 nights prior. She had traded her saffron silks for a quilted brigandine of charcoal wool, fringed at the collar with fox fur. A swirl of crimson scarf peeked from beneath the padded gorget, more flourish than protection, yet its flash of color lent fierce life to the wintry tableau. She sat straight in the saddle, eyes scanning ridgelines as diligently as any outrider. Behind them streamed the heart of the new alliance. Karstark archers wearing patched white cloaks hastily bled of flayed men emblems. A dozen surviving spear brothers from Castle Black in mismatched black and gray. Wildling raiders under Sigurd Crow-Eater, their shaggy furs transformed by bronze scale pauldrons scavenged from dead thens. And 200 northern smallfolk levies, who had thrown down Bolton-issued pikes the moment rumor of a Stark Martell coalition reached their villages. Davos Seaworth rode nearer the center, coaxing order from the line with steady words and an occasional call of close rank. There's mischief enough between hoof and ditch. The Onion Knight's weathered face was half hidden beneath the drooping brim of a salt-stiffened hood, but his lone intact hand rested close to the hilt of a short sword polished bright in recent nights beside campfires. They marched beneath no single banner. Instead, Oberyn had ordered 3 flags flown abreast: the silver direwolf of Stark, the red sun and spear of Martell, and a plain midnight black square left deliberately bare, a silent homage to the Night's Watch whose men had bled both north and south of the wall. The trio snapped together in the iron wind like restless siblings forced to share a yoke. Before first light, Oberyn had dispatched pairs of mounted scouts. Lean Karstark youths adept at reading snow tracks and older free folk who hunted by scent and silence. By midday, one returned with news of a walled crofters' village 5 leagues ahead, abandoned save for smoke curling faintly from a single chimney at the hilltop hall. They found it by mid-afternoon, a cluster of sag-backed huts huddled within a low turf rampart, roofs sagging beneath old ice, doorways gaping like toothless mouths. The smoke rose from the longhouse only because a pair of scrawny boys fed damp pine boughs into a hearth in hopes of warding off wolves. Their father, they explained, had been taken for tax by Ramsay Snow's riders. Their mother lay buried beneath the frozen garden plot. Oberyn ordered the baggage wagons rolled through the low gate. Casks of dried apples and salted pork were opened, and the boys were fed until their eyes glazed with disbelief. The camp's cookfires sent fragrant spirals of grease-rich smoke skyward, and soldiers hunkered into windbreaks fashioned from hay bales, cradling wooden bowls of stew thick with chickpeas from Dorne storehouses. The simple mercy of warmth and meat worked its magic. By dusk, the men and women who would shortly hurl themselves at Winterfell's battlements felt the hum of shared purpose deepen. That night, Oberyn convened a small council inside the longhouse. They gathered around a scarred oaken table hacked from a single trunk sometime during the reign of King Jaehaerys. Tallow tapers sputtered in earthen holders, their flames leaning as drafts threaded through the rattling shutters. A battered map of the central north, smudged by soot and thumbprint, unfurled between tankards of mulled ale. Davos placed a tin miniature of Winterfell, crudely cast but recognizable by its irregular inner wards, at the center. To breach this, he said, tapping the little fortress, we need allies inside or the whole north answering outside. We have some of each, but not enough of either yet. Lady Alice Karstark, wrapped in a seal-hide greatcloak, tapped a finger northwest of the castle. My Uncle Harrion languishes in the dungeons under the keep. Gods know if he still draws breath. Yet there are Karstark men keeping the hearth fires in villages along the White Knife. Send riders to raise them and we double our foot strength. Every man drawn from those villages leaves women and children exposed to wandering whites, Davos countered. Alice's eyes hardened. Every man left home sees his family nailed to Bolton flaying posts if we fail to unseat the bastard of the Dreadfort. Risk must be weighed. I say strike before Roose sends us skulking. Sigurd Crow-Eater lounged on a mead barrel, idly sharpening a curved bone knife. Walls are easier to climb when the men on top look elsewhere. Give me 5 ropes and 5 spears and I'll open their gate while the smith's son snores. Oberyn leaned on the map, bronze knuckles glinting. First, we must know the temper of the garrison. If Roose withdrew troops to fight Manderleys on the coast, his walls are skin deep. If not, we bleed ourselves for no gain. He shifted a carved flayed man token, fashioned from a pink candle stub around Winterfell. Our advantage is fear. Rumor spreads faster than ravens. Let them hear whispers of a viper in the snows and a dire wolf at his side. Let them see flayed men banners burned at crossroads. When dread blooms behind the walls, the hinges loosen. Ellaria poured spiced wine into a dented pewter cup. Fear seeds need only a night to sprout. I will see the seeds planted. She smiled with feline confidence, though the bruises of sleepless nights shadowed her eyes. Plans unfurled deeper into the evening, weaving scouting runs with sabotage sorties. Davos insisted on slips of parchment coded by ship signal flag patterns, an old smuggler's cipher, to coordinate distant detachments. Lady Alice pledged to ride at first light with 6 of her most trusted archers to rouse their kin. Sigrid would shadow a Bolton patrol rumored to pass the King's Barrow Road, ambushing them if numbers allowed. Small tasks, individually slight. Braided together, they formed the rope with which the great hound of Winterfell might be leashed. Long after the council dispersed, Oberyn lingered by the hearth where embers licked at blackened logs. His spear rested across his knees, its obsidian point reflecting the crimson heart of the coals. He recalled the last time he sat beside a northern hearth, Castle Black's, listening to Jon Snow's measured cadence. Snow. Fire. The converging lines of prophecy writ in flame and shadow. He felt those threads tightening, drawing him again toward something immense and unnamed. Ellaria approached, knees brushing his as she settled beside him. She laced her fingers through his, tracing the calluses with slow certainty. "You carry storm weight," she whispered. "I carry ghosts," he answered. "Every league north I ride." Elia's voice grows clearer. Ellaria's thumb grazed the half-healed scar on his cheek, a souvenir from the creek ambush days earlier. "Your sister does not demand you die for her." "No," he murmured. "She demands I live fiercely enough that her death is not the final note in our line song." He glanced down, meeting Ellaria's steady gaze. "If I fall at Winterfell, you will not." "If," he insisted, "take my letters to Doran. Tell him to send no more sand snakes north. One viper is enough in a land that already bleeds." She leaned forward, pressing warm lips to his. When she drew back, her eyes gleamed, not with tears but with flint. "If you fall, my love, I will raise your banner higher, not lower. There is no retreat from fate." They drank the rest of the wine in silence, sharing heat and the lullaby crackle of fire, until pale dawn seeped past shutters and trumpets summoned the camp to motion. Morning's first order dispatched Alice Karstark and her ride out under a ragged gray pennon once emblazoned with a flayed man now hastily overstitched into a snarling wolf. They vanished southeast down a frost-rimmed track, hooves drumming a muffled tattoo. Sigrid left an hour later with a pack of silent wildlings clad in soot-stained furs, melting into the pine gloom like wraiths. Oberyn's main column remained at the Crofters' village, fortifying ramparts with felled timber and appending carts against the gate, less to shelter themselves than to create the illusion of a larger host dug in. By midday, a fine powder snow began to fall, swirling in wind eddies, reducing sight lines. Oberyn took the opportunity to run spear drills in the village square, running his reduced corps, inflated now to 30 after volunteers begged inclusion, through the 6 forms of the Dornish Reach. Each stance, he explained, derived from desert creatures. The Sidewinder Circle, the Scorpion's Double Snap, the Ibex Leap, the Sandcat Feint, the Needleant Worry, and the Vulture's Hush. The Karstark archers watching from ramparts laughed at such florid names until Rusty Miles toppled one with a flick of butt spike that swept his legs so swiftly he never saw the blur. Davos spent much of the day at a makeshift desk inside the hall, quill scratching parchment as he coaxed words into the Karstark cipher. Each letter he sealed with a smear of black wax pressed. Beneath Oberyn's spearhead as signet, runners ferried the missives to outriders poised to set off at dusk, each bound for a different holdfast. Deepwood Motte, Castle Serwyn, Torrens Square. One carried a letter addressed simply Lady of Bear Island, though Davos confessed low he did not know if Lyanna Mormont still lived. "If she does," he said, sealing the wax, "her roar will be worth 100 men." Twilight deepened. Snow thickened from powder to heavy flakes that settled in a hush across every surface. Fires sprang up behind crude windbreaks. The smell of pine resin mingled with stew. Oberyn paced the rampart, eyes narrowed against whirling flurries. In the dim, he discerned movement at the tree line, shadowy figures weaving between trunks. He signaled a guard to hold fire until the password call came. A voice drifted through the gloom, muffled but distinct. Red sand, white death. The sentry relaxed. Sigurd's vanguard emerged, leading half a dozen horses bearing bundled shapes. As they drew closer, Oberyn saw the bundles were armored men, some bound, others slung lifeless across saddles. Sigurd leapt from her horse, stamping snow off boots. "Caught your Bolton patrol," she announced. "Left 3 heads on pikes at the crossroad cairn for good measure." Ilaria hurried forward, lantern lighting her features. "Any of them talk?" "One's talkin' still," Sigurd said, jerking a thumb at a bloodied knight straining against rawhide bonds. "Name's Ben Bones. Piss-poor name for a flayer, but he says they ride out of Winterfell in 2s and 3s, couriers mostly, bringing quotas and taking pelts. Pelts, Oberyn knew, meant human hides in Bolton parlance. He suppressed a surge of revulsion. "Put him in the grain shed. Feed him. I'll speak to him after he warms." Sigurd smirked. "Feed him a toe?" Oberyn favored her with a thin smile that left intent ambiguous, and she laughed, leading the captive away. That night Oberyn interrogated Ben Bones alone. He used no tools, only quiet questions, a steaming mug of honeyed ale he replenished when the man's story faltered, and the unblinking stare of someone who knew 50 ways to kill with 2 fingers. Bones, bruised but alive, spilled every scrap. Ramsay had left Winterfell 5 days prior with 20 bastards wearing his colors, bound for Moat Cailin to meet a contingent of Freys escorting fresh stock. Roose remained behind with 200 men-at-arms, bolstered by 100 sellswords in new mail of indistinct livery. Qyburn's southern hirelings by rumor. Most of the Karstarks still in the castle were prisoners shackled in the Undercroft. The crypts were rumored sealed after ghosts were sighted. Oberyn listened, weighing lies against inconsistencies. At the end, he touched the man's shoulder with almost paternal gentleness. "You served a cruel house," he observed, tone bereft of judgment. Bones swallowed. "I served who fed my daughters, and now they starve behind Bolton walls." Oberyn did not phrase it as a question. The night sagged. Oberyn stood. "Prove your repentance. Guide our infiltrators through the postern by the Hunter's Gate. Fail us, and your daughters will starve twice." He let silence linger. "Help us, and they eat at high table when snow melts." The man's answer came in a broken whisper. "By the old gods and new, I'll open the gate." 2 days later, with snow still falling but winds gentler, Oberyn split his force again. Davos would lead the bulk in a night march along the eastern road, presenting as a ragtag train of refugees seeking shelter. Their visible numbers, swelled by free folk women and children, would draw the watchful eyes of Winterfell's sentries, while the real blade slipped beneath. That blade comprised Oberyn himself, Ilaria, Sigurd's wildlings, Rusty Miles, and the Spear Corps' finest 6, and Ben Bones wearing a Bolton surcoat stitched hastily back together so that its flayed man matched Winterfell's own. They carried nothing but spears and short swords tipped in dragonglass, cloaked in grays and whites to merge with stone and snowfall. At dusk they set out, tracking northwest along frozen cattle paths, then arcing south to approach Winterfell from the coffin-quiet woodlet northwest of the walls. Winterfell materialized through mist at third watch. Squat towers and patched ramparts, a dark island amid undulating white. Smoke from the great hall's chimneys rose in tattered plumes. Torches along the battlements burned saffron and green, but fewer than Oberyn remembered from childhood tales recounted by traveling minstrels. He watched, motionless, as a patrol of 3 trudged past the Hunter's Gate, lanterns swinging, footsteps squeaking over ice. Ben Bones murmured the timing. They come round again in 40 heartbeats, and together they slid into the moat drybed while the guards' retreating silhouettes shrank. At the postern, a rust-flecked grill barred entry. Bones fished an iron key from beneath gambeson, turned with a whine. Inside, a stone passage slanted upward, draped in cobwebs. They slipped through, shutting the grill behind. Sigrid dispatched 2 guards at an interior station with knives to throat and a silent twist. Rusty Miles caught the bodies, easing them to flagstones without a sound. Oberyn could almost taste the castle's pulse now. Distant thuds of a smith at work, the echo of rowdy laughter from the great hall, the dull roar of hot springs beneath stone. Ilaria whispered, "Stench of fear here. Smells like sweet rot." They advanced through a warren of servants' passages. At every junction, Ben Bones crouched, listening, then beckoning. Twice they ducked into alcoves as guards clomped past, chattering about the fry party due in 2 days with the girl bride. The second time, Oberyn caught a clearer exchange. Ramsay planned to parade the fry girl in flayed silks to celebrate his ascension once Roose departed south to attend Queen Cersei's council. Oberyn felt bile rise and pressed his palm to cold stone until it passed. At last they reached the undercroft. 2 thick iron-bound doors sealed the stairwell, each flanked by a pair of guards in Bolton pink over hauberks of heavy chain. Oberyn signaled. Rusty and Sigrid moved as a single shadow, spears reversing to pommels. In 2 heartbeats, both guards slumped, skulls split by blunt bronze. Ilaria darted forward, catching the second before he crashed, lowering him gently. They lifted the bar. The hinges squealed, protesting. Stone steps corkscrewed downward into blackness laced with damp. The smell, urine, mold, despair, wafted up like heat from a furnace. Ben Bones produced another key ring. They descended. Cells lined a narrow corridor, each door an iron grid allowing glimpses of skeletal figures huddled in rag blankets. Karstark beards, manderly gray whiskers, a Serwyn lady wrapped around her shivering daughter. At first they recoiled from torchlight, expecting cruelty. Then recognition flickered. Lady Alice stepped forward, cloak dusted with fresh snow. She had rejoined after raising her levies. Her voice rang low but triumphant. "Uncle Harrion." A gaunt man rose, shackled at wrists, eyes sunken but unbowed. He and Alice pressed foreheads through iron bars. Tears streaked soot and grime. Oberyn moved cell to cell, unlocking. He pressed weapons into trembling hands. "You wish justice? Earn it," he murmured. Within moments, 24 prisoners stood armed with scavenged spears and clubs. They followed Oberyn back up the stairs. At the landing he paused, listening. The music of feast hall pipes floated faintly. Perfect. They burst into the yard like storm lightning. Harrion Karstark and his kin led a surging wave that crashed into astonished Sellswords smoking near the ash tree. Sigrid's wildlings scaled a scaffolding, raining dragonglass arrows onto the Bailey watchtower. Oberyn vaulted a wine barrel, spear spinning into a guard's visor. Shouts ruptured the night. "Karstark! Stark! Viper and Wolf!" Inside the great hall, Roose Bolton rose from high seat just as a panicked squire stumbled through doors flung wide, babbling of uprising. The lord's cold eyes flickered calculation. He ordered half his table guard to secure the gates, the rest to drag the Fry emissaries to safety. Confusion seethed. Sellswords dropped goblets, some bellowing allegiance to whoever paid. Others hesitated, uneasy at the sudden scent of revolt. Ben Bones and 2 newly freed guards burst into the hall from the kitchen passage, seizing the moment. They hurled the severed but cleaned heads of the earlier patrol onto trestle tables, where they rolled among trenchers and tankards, eyes glassy. Screams rippled. Several Sellswords bolted for side exits. Roose drew his longsword. "Loyal men to me," he announced in that mild tone that carried farther than shouts. A half-dozen formed a half-circle. Behind, 3 cloaked figures rose. Southern mercenaries in black mail stamped with a red sun disk. Qyburn's silent sisters, mute torturers turned swordsmen. Oberyn crossed the threshold, stepping over a toppled bench. His bronze armor gleamed russet in torch glare. Ilaria at his side twirled twin daggers. Harrion and Alice pushed up behind with Karstark loyalists. Roose regarded them with clinical interest. "Prince Oberyn, The north grows exotic. The north will grow thrones from your bones tonight, Oberyn replied. Brave words. Roos's blade tilted. Yet you stand fewer. Numbers count for less when your men carry fear like wet porridge. Oberyn advanced. His spear whisked, carving an unseen sigil in the air. Yield and I shall grant you the mercy you denied so many. Roos smiled the smile of a man discussing weather. Mercy is a maiden's fancy. I prefer certainty. He gestured. The silent sisters moved, blades a glinting ripple. Oberyn lunged, entering the vulture's hush. His spear point whispered past the first assassin's guard, slicing through mail rings, exiting the back in a mist of scarlet. The corpse folded while Oberyn spun, half sliding, catching a second sister's knee. Ilaria vaulted off a bench, driving a dagger into the exposed neck. Harrion warded the third with a broken chair leg until Rusty's spear pinned her lungs. Roos walked backward toward the dais. Impressive. Yet Ramsay will skin your lovers. One by. A crossbow twanged. An arrow, dragonglass dipped, sprouted from Roos's breast. Davos Seaworth stepped from the doorway opposite, lowering the weapon handed him minutes earlier by a Karstark scout. Men from the refugee column now poured into the hall. Manderley blue and white cloaks, Risswell riders, even a scattering of armored women, Bear Islanders with axes gleaming. Roos looked down at the shaft embedded between ribs, more perplexed than pained. He touched the broken wood, smearing black ichor. The dragonglass burnt blood differently, and mouthed something no one caught. Then he sank to knees beside the high seat, sword clanging from limp fingers. Silence ballooned, broken by a single sob from a servant girl. Oberyn exhaled once, steady, then strode to the dais. He seized the flayed man banner draped behind the throne, tore it down, and cast it into the nearest brazier. Flames whooshed green where hidden wildfire residue caught, lapping the cloth to curls of ash. In its absence, the stones behind looked strangely bare, as though waiting centuries for breath. Harrion Karstark climbed 3 steps, faces the hall. Winterfell is free. His voice cracked but carried. By right of blood and fire, House Stark stands again. A roar answered, a patchwork of oaths, cheers, sobs. Karstarks embraced Manderleys. Wildlings hoisted Bear Islanders onto shoulders. Sellswords threw down swords and begged pardons. Oberyn watched chest tight. Somewhere above, a raven croaked, perhaps within the rookery's dark rafters, perhaps inside his imagination. He thought of Jon Snow on the wall, staring into black woods where dawn seldom breached. Ilaria touched his elbow. It begins. Oberyn nodded. Here end Boltons, but the lion prowls still. The next 3 days unfolded in fevered labor. Bodies were burned in the outer yard, mixed of friend and foe alike. Priests of the old gods muttered over roots where a new heart tree sapling would be planted come spring. The flaying racks in the kennels were hacked apart for firewood. The kennels themselves repurposed as infirmary overflow. Maester Caliot arrived with Davos's column, worked beside Winterfell's aged Maester Wolkan to cleanse wounds and amputate limbs turned black by frostbite. Ilaria supervised kitchens, rationing barley and oats until grain wagons from White Harbor arrived. Messages flew, ravens to Castle Black, to White Harbor, to Bear Island. One even soared south toward Riverrun, where word said the Blackfish still defied the phrase. Oberyn penned that one himself, lines bold, urging Tully's swords to rally under snow and sun once more. On the second dawn, a horn blast echoed outside the walls. Scouts reported a lone rider approaching under truce flag. Sentries ushered the man through the gate. He wore black plate gilded at seams, helm styled like snarling gorget. Across his back loomed a grotesquely large sword, sheathed in crimson leather stitched with golden lions. When the helm came off, the sight dropped jaws. Not a man at all, but a woman. Tall, braided auburn hair, face weather-creased. She spoke with a Riverland's lilt. Ser Brienne of Tarth. I rode from Riverrun with message from Lady Sansa Stark. Gasps followed. Sansa Stark, a rumor knitted by bards into ghost story these past seasons. Alive? Brienne explained swiftly. Sansa escaped Ramsay's clutches months earlier, sheltered first at Mole's Town, then ferried by Asha Greyjoy across the Bight. She now gathered Stark loyalists in secret along the Flint Cliffs, awaiting sign that Winterfell could be claimed. Brienne bore her words. Tell the North the wolves remember. Tell Jon Snow I come. Joy and shock rippled. Harrien clasped Brienne's gauntlet in both hands. Oberyn felt gooseflesh prick beneath linen. Prophecy threads tangling again. That night, as the castle drowsed, Oberyn climbed the battlements alone. The snow had ceased, unveiling a night sky shot through with stars, cold and fierce. He leaned on the parapet, exhaling plumes that drifted like offerings to unseen gods. Below, Winterfell's courtyards glimmered with fresh torchlines, sentinel shapes pacing in orderly circuits. No flayed men remained on walls. Instead, the dire wolf and sun and spear flew side by side, their cloths snapping like dueling tongues. Somewhere inside the keep, Illaria's laugh rose bright, followed by Karstark singing. A bawdy song of hot springs and even hotter mead. Life returning, like tiny green shoots pressing through snowdrifts. Oberyn fingered the obsidian spearhead at his belt, idly tracing the fine fractures spidering from its tip. In the crystals he glimpsed reflection. His eyes ringed with shadow, his mouth curved in a smile equal parts satisfaction and sorrow. Elia, he whispered inside his mind, I carry you further north than you ever dreamed. Soft boots scraped behind him. Brienne of Tarth emerged, cloak billowing. She halted a polite distance. Prince Oberyn, she began, voice low. I owe thanks for liberating this place. No more than I owe Lady Sansa for enduring its torment, he replied. Brienne approached the Merlin, gazing over snowfields. War seldom feels just. Tonight it does. For now, Oberyn said. Tomorrow we discover new injustices, and the dance continues. He paused. You served Renly Baratheon, did you not? Brienne's jaw tightened at old memory. I did, and found purpose again serving the daughters of Stark. He inclined head. Purpose may change but not die. Brienne studied him. What is your purpose now that Bolton banners burn? He answered without looking away from constellations. To see ice and fire join before night eternal swallows all. Jon Snow and Sansa Stark must stand together, wolf siblings against lion, against dead, against prophecy. My spear will guard that joining. Brienne nodded slow. Then we serve similar dreams. Her gaze lifted to the stars. Renly taught me men fight best for those they love. And you loved him? I did. She gave a small smile. In my fashion. Oberyn chuckled, a warm ember of humor in dark. Then let us fight in ours. He extended hand. Brienne clasped forearm. Two warriors bound by divergent paths, converging like twin streams beneath a frozen moon. Dawn broke peach pale. Oberyn stood before assembled soldiers in the yard. Word had come via Raven at dawn. Jon Snow's ranging had returned to Castle Black, battered but alive, bearing two white walker bodies preserved in dragonglass sarcophagi. The Night King massed beyond the shivering sea, and an ice storm unlike any in recorded chronicles churned toward the wall. Oberyn's voice carried across the yard. Winterfell holds, but winter moves. We ride north again, to the wall, to Jon Snow, to a war larger than thrones. Those who stay must fortify this castle, shelter the weak, feed the realm's memory. Those who ride must accept that death walks on two legs of frost. He surveyed faces. Karstark steel, wildling ferocity, Manderly stubbornness, Bear Island resolve. Choose now, a rumble answered. Swords thunking shield rims, spear butts pounding earth. Near every able soldier stepped forward. Even Brienne, though newly arrived, placed palm upon pommel as vow. Oberyn nodded, throat thick. He turned as Harrien Karstark approached. I remain, Harrien said. Someone must hold these stones for the Stark's return. Oberyn clasped his wrist. Then hold them as though they were Elia's bones. Harrien's gaze burned. I will. Preparations moved with the swiftness of sharpened purpose. Maester Wolkan distributed raven feathers to messengers bound for every northern house, each feather stained with a single drop of Maester Caliot's crimson ink, symbol of blood owed to the realm's defense. The blacksmiths hammered arrowheads from dragonglass shards unearthed under the forge. Children learned to string bows. Grandmothers brewed last year's turnips into potent spirit for lantern fuel. 3 evenings later, the northbound column departed Winterfell under curtains of aurora lighting the sky, a shimmering veil of green and violet, as though the heavens themselves bore witness. Oberyn rode at the head beside Brienne, Ilaria just behind with Sigrid. Davos commanded the baggage, Brienne's squire Podrick carrying a standard newly sewn. Direwolf rampant over sun and spear, a motif still unfamiliar but already resonant. Within hours the castle faded behind a ridge, its torches mere distant fireflies. Ahead lay leagues of snow, frozen lakes, and at journey's end a wall of ice tall as hope and bleak as memory. Oberyn's thoughts strayed there, to Jon waiting, perhaps pacing atop those battlements, scanning for allies in the blowing dark. He urged his stallion into an easy canter, savoring the rhythmic lurch of muscle and the crisp slap of air in lungs. On the trailing wind he fancied he heard faint music, Elia's harp, Rhaegar's chords, or simply the high song of winter itself, repeating through ages. Whatever the melody, Oberyn Martell matched his breathing to its tempo and rode on into the shade of night, bronze spear angled forward like a sundial seeking sunrise. Far south in King's Landing, beneath the torchlit vaults of the Red Keep's dungeons, Qyburn studied a crystal vial swirling with pale blue motes. Beside him the mountain, Ser Robert Strong, loomed motionless, visor concealing corpse-pale eyes. On a stone slab lay a White Walker corpse bound in amber glass. The motes danced through CKs in the crystal, casting ghostly lights on the maester's face. He smiled thin, murmuring, "Soon, my queen, we shall outwinter winter itself." Above, Cersei Lannister stood at her balcony, staring northward beyond the city's haze. Somewhere out there, snakes and wolves dared defy her crown. She raised a jeweled goblet of wine and whispered into the wind, "Come then, let us see which blood runs colder." The wind carried her words into gathering dark, where ravens wheeled like shards of night.